This is simply the best survival horror game ever created. In fact, had it come out in 2004, it would have been my pick for Game of the Year. If you don't own Resident Evil 4, it owns you. An absolute must-have. 9.5 IGN. Simply put, Resident Evil 4 is the tightest, most accessible game in the series and one of the best games out there. Games Radar 100. There are no flaws in Resident Evil 4. It is the greatest horror game to date. I never thought a game, or a movie for that matter, could deliver pulse-pounding action in such an awe-inspiring way. March 2005, page 134 of Game Informer. These are just some of the overwhelmingly glowing reviews of Resident Evil 4 from its release in 2005. Heralded as one of the best games ever made and one of the best in the Resident Evil franchise, it's here that I must kind of contend with these statements. As I am writing this in 2023, I'm kind of mixed on Resident Evil 4 as a whole, and with hindsight being at our disposal here, I have to say that in playing this, it's easy to see why Resident Evil went the way it did. An action-packed romp leaving the horror behind that we had seen in the last outings of the series. This is a retrospective on Resident Evil 4 and why this game almost killed the franchise despite it actually being a great video game. With the remake on the way, or here depending on when you're watching this, let's look back at this game, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel for more, and let me know what your thoughts on Resident Evil 4 are in the comments down below. I'm in there consistently always looking and reading and responding, so just keep it civil, keep it nice to each other, and let's not attack each other in the comments. Now with that, on with the video.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
We open our returning hero, Leon S. Kennedy, no longer a rookie cop in Raccoon City, but working for the federal government on a mission to locate and rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, with her last known location being in a backwater Spanish province in Europe. Being driven by two policia, the three spat back and forth, shit-talking each other the entire way while heading to where Ashley was last seen. I love this beginning scene of Resident Evil 4 as we get to learn a lot about Leon's character and see how he's grown and evolved since the last time we saw him in Resident Evil 2. No longer a rookie cop who is showing up on his first day of the job, we see a much more confident Leon, snarking back with the police but focused on the task at hand. The silent determination, as well as his obvious improvement in skill given how he now works for the federal government and for the president directly, shows his growth and abilities as well, as some rookie cop wouldn't be hand selected by the president if he didn't have the skills to step up to the job. This gap of 7 years also allows for the player who is an old hat at the series to wonder what he's been doing all this time. Not only that, but Leon was given some real stylish flair here in this outing of the series, sporting the appropriate emo haircut and slick fur trimmed coat. This ability to make the character stand out amongst any others thus far. I mean, let's face it, this version of Leon is iconic and really sticks with you, making him recognizable to anybody with even slightly play video games. And short of maybe Claire, it might be the most fleshed out in the Resident Evil franchise as a whole. A true ode to the power of Resident Evil 2. I love Leon in Resident Evil 4, and as a character truly carries this game forward with his blend of seriousness as well as camp. I swear this guy has more quips than in any given situation that give this game a charm not seen in any other Resident Evil game before or after. From
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
to
So maybe you have 9 lives, but it doesn't matter now, Mr. Kennedy. I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Say whatever you please. Die, you worm!
The ability for Leon to thread the camp with the supernatural and disturbing is masterful. It is a trait I hope is carried forward in the upcoming remake, as it wasn't in 6 for God's sake. As we approach the nearby house, pistol in hand, there's a sense of eeriness surrounding the forest. It's quiet, the sound of leaves crunching beneath your foot as you take each step forward. There's a feeling that you're being watched. I mean, there's a whole cutscene where you're actually being watched from inside a house. Entering said house, we see a villager stoking a fire in a fairly dilapidated home. Leon asks if he's seen Ashley anywhere, holding her recent picture, and in response, the villager grabs the scythe and takes a swing at Leon, yelling and not listening to anything he has to say or shouting. This is where we're given the first taste of combat here, which leads us into the gameplay changes in Resident Evil 4, and there are a metric shit ton. Up until this point, Resident Evil has had a style of gameplay that really has never changed since its original outing in 1996, that being the utilizing of tank controls and aiming in the general direction of an enemy to shoot, requiring no true aiming skill. That was really just, point and click. Resident Evil 4 not only changes the combat in these games, but the interaction with the world as a whole. Long gone are fixed camera angles we had been used to up until this point, instead following Leon finally over the shoulder, being ingrained in his perspective, and now bringing the series forward into the playstyle that we now have in tons of games games today. This was definitely not the first game to do the third person over the shoulder, but for this drastic of a change and how these games are played, it made it a ton easier to actually interact with. I mean, hell, I've spent so much time playing every other game in the series thus far, it was kind of jarring to go back to a moderately modern style of gameplay. Because of the change to a truly third-person perspective, combat has now become more tactile as well, giving the player the ability to aim at said enemies, leading to the all-important headshot become a skill-based advantage rather than a random chance you had in the prior games, where no true aiming actually existed. One aspect of the gunplay which I do feel goes underserved and under-talked about is the inclusion of a laser attachment on every weapon of the game, essentially a reticle that you would typically find in most third-person shooters like Gears of War or Uncharted. However, using the laser, this keeps reticle to be actually needed, something which I wish more games would actually adapt, much like Dead Space. It also acts as a visual indicator of the sway when aiming, once again visualizes the impact of your upgrades, which you can do to every gun in the game. More on that later. One aspect which I did struggle with is the insistence on Resident Evil to force the player to plant and shoot, rather than shoot on the move. With the amount of enemies this game actually throws at you, the lack of ability to move and shoot at the same time feels foreign to me, a choice which I can only assume was implemented to keep the tension alive when taking a shot, making each round you fire a distinct choice, rather than just spraying bullets downrange. And while it really does work in that regard, it still felt weird when actually playing, as humans and 98% of video game protagonists can move and shoot at the same time, sacrificing accuracy for mild mobility. The other major change in the combat and to the interactions within Resident Evil 4 as a whole were the introductions of contextual prompts for Leon to interact with the world. For example, no longer are your two options shoot a guy or run away. Shooting a villager in the knees staggers the poor bastard, stunning him for just long enough to allow Leon to perform the follow-up kick attack, knocking the poor infected villager on his ass, allowing for a further bevy of options, from the stabbing of the knife to conserve ammo, blasting him away, or simply running at that point. Not only that, but when grabbed by an enemy, a QTE or button prop event pops up for the player to perform or get killed. QuickTime events or QTEs were a staple in gaming back in the mid-2000s, forcing the player to fully stay engaged with the experience rather than kicking back and enjoying a cutscene. The desire was not only to keep that engagement alive, but also to allow for quote-unquote player agency in areas of the game that used to just be a video that played out for you. And while at the time it did work on me pretty well and the use of QTEs were fun to me, Resident Evil 4 uses a lot of them, and many of them being instant game overs, as they are intended to kill Leon rather than giving you a chance to actually survive. They really did begin to wear on me after a while here in 2023. From running from a boulder, dodging the Gigantor troll fucker, or the CQC fight with the late game boss Jack Krauser, failing any of these leads to an instant death and forcing the player to go back to the last save, all for missing a button prompt, which just kind of plain sucks. This is the whole other side tangent, but I'm glad that these are gone from games, as button mashing, although it will not be the last we'll see it in Resident Evil, don't really enter the franchise that much anymore. The inventory system got a drastic overhaul as well, and not knowing where this fits in with the rest of the video, I feel the need to talk about it now. I'd be remiss if not to discuss it, as it may be the shining star mechanic in this game that was never revisited until the latest outing in Resident Evil 8. Past games designated 6 to 8 slots where you stored your weapons, ammo, meds, and the like. While in later games, some of the long-barreled firearms would end up taking 2 slots, it was nothing that complex, just managing what you brought with you and what you placed in the item box. Well, once again here in Resident Evil 4, we have no item box. However, with the inventory case Leon has, there's almost no need. And the creation of what essentially amounts to a minigame of Tetris with your items not only makes you think about what you have and what you can grab, but also how it sits in your case as well. Essentially, you're given a grid of boxes. Each item takes up a required number of slots. 1 slot for herbs and grenades, going all the way up to like a 2x12 for the sniper rifle and another 2x1 for the required optic. Couple that with the 2x1 slots for ammo, combined herbs and first aid sprays, and you're in for a good deal of time working solely on your inventory, rotating and slotting in as much as you can to fit in the small defined space. I love this style of inventory management, as you essentially get to play another game just to make all the stuff fit. And with the satisfying clicks and turns and the feeling of min-maxing your inventory, it's an amazing system which I really wish carried over to the rest of the series. I am glad the style of it sort of came back for Resident Evil 8, however Capcom needs to keep that going for sure in whatever outing of Resident Evil we have next. But for now, we really need to return to Leon. Post the attack from the villager, along with his buddies and I guess maybe his wife, we make our way to the village. Scoping out the area beforehand, we see one of the police members burned on the pyre in the middle of town, and without the invitation to the wiener roast, Leon dispatches the villagers in a tense fight to immerse the player in learning the combat or die. It's safe to say that this area is probably the most memorable in the entire game, with its interwoven interiors full of ammo and a shotgun, as well as subsequent healing items, cows, pigs, chickens, and eggs. And bad guys. Lots and lots of bad guys. We also get the introduction of the Chainsaw Bagman and mass amounts of enemies rushing Leon around every turn. This area is an absolute nail-biter. The village may be one of the best designed combat arenas as well, so when the bell chimes and all the villagers leave, you're still left with the tension as the title card rolls. With this being my dozenth playthrough of this game, this area still hits. However, in looking back, this area really should have served as a precursor to what the series was going to be gameplay-wise, and in hindsight, it probably wasn't the best choice. In playing through the other games in the series for this video, there's a formula how tension is created, that being the drastically limited resources in both ammo and health, along with the tight corridors and enemies that can absolutely take a beating, draining said resources in the process. The player is meant to always feel on the back foot and when engaging in combat, and whether it's actually a good choice to do so or not. And in playing Resident Evil 4, I never really felt that tension anymore. You get tense in a engaging in combat sort of way, much like how you do in Halo or Gears of War, basically just worried about maximizing your uptime for murder, knowing that there will be more ammo and meds on the other side of the fight. I played through on normal, which players have to go through in order to get to the hard difficulties, and in here I was just constantly finding ammo, health, treasure, money, and the like, losing that feeling of needing to choose my fights, as I now had the ability to just blast through everything in my way. This is further realized with the introduction of the shopkeeper in Resident Evil 4, and while he may be the best shop owner in all of video games, this addition once again poses an issue when it comes to balancing and keeping tension that is in a Resident Evil staple, and survival horror. Throughout the runtime of RE4, you find various treasure items along the path, and often off said path, which can be sold to the shopkeeper for a variety of items, most notably guns, first aid sprays, and most importantly, weapon upgrades. In prior games, you would be able to find gun parts like muzzle brakes or pistol stocks to improve the stats on the gun in some sort of arbitrary way the game never really told you. In Resident Evil 4, not only are you able to find and purchase set attachments in order to make your guns better or have less sway, but you also have the ability to upgrade the stats with the gun as well, from ammo, passy, reload speed, and damage. Now, to be clear, I do enjoy this feature in Resident Evil 4, as it is fun having that side goal to work for, and seeing the progression of Leon in the form of upgrading his weapons is pretty satisfying, much like a Skinner box and poking the button and getting the treat. However, to the mid to end game, after you have a few weapons fully upgraded, for me it was the shotgun and the sniper rifle, you're just able to kind of blow everything away with relative ease, making the end portion of the game, and incidentally, the more combat heavy sections, kind of a joke. While this seems like a minor nitpick in the grand scheme of this game that is absolutely beloved, this upgrade mechanic left me feeling bored by the end of Resident Evil. All the tension that was even there for the combat just stripped away in the mass shootout with villagers and Gatling guns and me one-tapping everybody until the bubbling goo that they were just spilled upon the floor. As a longtime lover of the franchise, I have to admit it was deflating to feel the horror just kind of disappear. And with the success of this game from critics and the audience alike, is it really a surprise looking back at all of these combat arenas that were thrown into Resident Evil 4 and see why Capcom went the way they did with 5 and 6? A change to the formula of a video game franchise is never a bad thing, and keeping the series fresh is, I'm sure, a hard thing to do. But by the end, it really didn't feel like Resident Evil anymore. It just had this sad realization in this last playthrough that this game was really kind of the death of a franchise for a while. I don't know, it was hard to come to grips with, hence why we're making the video. And all this said, and we haven't even touched the story so far. So with that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of Resident Evil 4's story, which, you know, is also still pretty good.
No longer will the United States think they can police the world forever. So, we kidnapped the president's daughter in order to give her our power and then send her back.
No.
After the mass amounts of combat that is the village area and heading off to find Ashley, Leon runs into Luis, captured by the cult, and soon after becomes captured himself and subsequently infected with the parasite known as Los Plagas, or the Plague.
Soon, you will become unable to resist this intoxicating power.
After waking up with Luis, we learn that Luis was once a cop from Madrid as well as the main researcher for the cult, essentially cultivating Los Plagas, which is also have infected the entire village and everybody on the island. The two go their separate ways, and after fighting a giant mutated sea monster, as well as the Gigantor trollfucker, Leon finds Ashley locked away in the tower of the cult church, much like Rapunzel but without the hair. Also, I believe that she's voiced by the same person who voiced Emma Emmerich from Metal Gear Solid 2, so I guess she really has a type of voice acting. Upon freeing her, we run into Oswald Sadler, the cult leader, and as you could tell by his fancy purple robes, who reveals that he's injected Los Plagas into Ashley as well, who will then be controlled into injecting the president with the sample as well, beginning his quest to dethrone the United States as the world leader and begin his quest to control the globe. You see, Los Plagas acts as sort of a mind control parasite over the infected, as we will see with Leon multiple times throughout the game when we run into Sadler. The two jump through a window, making their escape, and head to a cabin where the extraction chopper is meant to come and pick them up. This section of the game, and honestly whenever Ashley is around, turns this game into a glorified escort mission, another trope of the mid-2000s, where Leon must protect, direct, and guard Ashley from either dying or being taken away by the cult. And while a drain on your health resources to keep two people alive instead of one is a nice bit of item management and engagement added to the mix, escort missions have always pretty much sucked, as AI really struggle to keep in lockstep with the player, leading to frustrating bouts of Ashley being stuck on walls, stuck on steps, Ashley dying or being parted away, and in general just slowing down the entire flow of the gameplay. You can tell her to hide in a box, but it's faster just to run through. Resident Evil 4 is absolutely best when she is not around, and thankfully there's quite a bit of runtime in this game where she is just completely MIA. Reaching the cabin, the duo meet up with Luis again, and after their chopper is discovered to have been shot down, a swarm of villagers come to attack and are subsequently dispatched by Leon and Luis. Luis runs off into the night, off to go look for something to help, and Ashley and Leon make their way to the gondola, taking out the captain with this cool fake eye in the process, and make their way to hopefully somewhere safe. It is here we meet the acolyte of Sadler, the most confusing part of the game for me, Ramon Salazar, a small boy-like person who lives in a giant castle in the middle of the woods in Spain. Now, the whole thing doesn't really make much sense, and while this part is memorable for sure, due to the aesthetics of the castle and Salazar as a character, the entire arc of him kind of feels like a bizarre side tangent to the entire story.
My, we've got a feisty one. If you care for your own well-being, I suggest you surrender yourself and simply become our hostage. Or Mr. Scott, you can give us the girl because you're not worth a penny, I'm afraid. You can die.
I'm never turning into one of them. Never.
Got that right. We'll find a cure.
After coughing blood up, Ashley begins to run away from Leon, only to be captured by Salazar himself and taken away, forcing Leon to make his way through said castle in an effort to find her. On the way to reaching Ashley, Leon runs into Luis one more time, providing him with a serum to slow the infection growth inside both himself and Ashley, as well as providing a sample of Los Plagas. Unfortunately, this is the end of our friend Luis, murdered by Sadler, who takes the sample away, as well as taking away Leon's main ally on this godforsaken island.
Now that I have the sample, you serve me no purpose.
Sadler!
My boy Salazar will make sure you follow the same fate.
We also meet returning character Ada Wong, who we learn is on the island to locate said sample of Los Plagas as well, sporting her typical red dress and working in the shadows for a group called the Organization. We do learn a bit about Ada's mission and side content after beating the main story, boiling down to how she secretly helps Leon from the shadows while working with Wesker to find the sample of the parasite for themselves. While it's pretty fun to play as Ada, it basically just boils down to the bit of her story and mild substance provided to the world at large.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Leon. Long time no see.
Leon eventually reaches Ashley, but is unable to get to her. This is where we, the player, take the role of Ashley in an effort to make it through the dungeons and flipping switches in order to escape. This scene is actually pretty fun, as you're armed with nothing but the ability to throw lanterns and crawl through tight spaces. This really breeds tension and having a minimal way of defending yourself. It really is a great change of pace to everything we've done so far. It is short-lived, however, as the two are eventually reunited and they locate the machine to basically rip the infection out of them, relieving them of Sadler's plan of mind control and killing the president with a bug, I guess.
You sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Alright. Here goes nothing. How are you feeling?
Like $1,000,000.
I thought you were gonna die. Alright. Guess I'm up.
Soon after, however, Ashley is once again caught and taken to the military base on the other side of the island. Leon, with the help of Ada, kills Salazar and heads to the base as well, and with the help of his new helicopter buddy, who just shows up to try and save them, takes all the villagers in the military base to task. This is where the action really ratchets up to like 1,000,000 with explosions, Gatling guns, tons of enemies, and exploding walls coming to the fore, losing literally every sense of horror and dread that this game may have held on to. We also fight Leon's ex-comrade, Jack Krauser, someone who the game acts like we should know, and if you played, I guess, the Darkside Chronicles light gun rail shooter on Wii, you might, because we all played serious games on the Wii back in the day. Sidebar, I first played Resident Evil 4 on the Wii, and no cap, that is probably the best damn port of this game out there. However, I do wish more was done with Krauser here, as he kind of just shows up, with the player expecting to know who he is, because this is evidently a huge revelation to Leon. I'm sure I'm missing something here, so let me know in the comments down below, and no, I'm not playing a light gun game for the Wii in 2023. I do hope that they flesh this out more in the remake, but obviously we'll have to wait and see at the time of recording this. After more fights with new BOWs in the base, Leon is able to reach Ashley, and we move to the final encounter with Sadler, who is now transformed into a massive biomutant in typical Resident Evil fashion. With the help of Ada and cranes with support beams attached to them, Leon is able to defeat said cult leader of Sadler, and as he plummets to his death, Ada snatches up the Los Plagas sample and tosses Leon keys to a jet ski, while she leaves in the helicopter above in the skies, her mission now complete, and departs the island. Ashley and Leon make a break for the jet ski and escape the island as the self-destruct sequence inevitably goes off. Once again, a trope in the Resident Evil series now that we have seen in, I think, every game to this point. I swear, if there were this many explosions in random places around the globe, I feel like somebody might have something to say about it by now, but I digress. We bring the story of Resident Evil 4 to a close with an absolute bang. Leon and Ashley on the move to the next adventure in the dreaded Resident Evil 6.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
Sorry.
Somehow I knew you'd say that, but it doesn't hurt to ask, you know? So, who was that woman anyway?
Why do you ask?
Come on, tell me.
She's like a part of me I can't let go. Let's leave it at that.
From a narrative perspective, it's safe to say that this game might have been the best story in any game in the Resident Evil franchise thus far, and probably since. Shifting the formula from a couple of expansive locations, Resident Evil 4 takes Leon and across a ton of different locales on the island, shifting the focus from an enclosed open space, which I realize is a dichotomy, but you know what I mean, much like the Spencer Manor or the police station, and turn it into a long series of mostly linear areas, each space getting progressively more fucked as the night goes on. A small detail that I do appreciate is just shift in time as we move throughout different areas. Starting off at midday in the village, we shift to evening with the first encounter with Luis, and again to night as we make our way to the castle. By the time we kill Sadler, defeat Krauser, and move to the fight with Sadler, the early morning hours begin to reflect in the glow of the new day as our two heroes zip off on a jet ski to safety, showing the progression of time and danger that looms in the night. This can be seen in the Los Plagas victims as well, as once night descends, when exploding their juicy heads, a centipede-like bioweapon sprouts from their exposed neckline to keep the creature alive and honestly vastly more dangerous and tanky than the original villager that was there before was. While playing Resident Evil 4, I remember why I enjoyed it so much for the first time and still do today. The gameplay is tight despite a few of my gripes with it, and by the end, you really do feel like a complete badass, murdering dozens of infected victims per room by the end of the day. With the power of fantasy is real and damn is it fun. And despite my criticisms of certain antagonists, Salazar to be specific, every character in this game is pretty endearing. Leon's quips, Ashley's determination to stay alive while contending with the infection and being pretty much useless. Sadler is a truly menacing foe, and Salazar, despite how hokey and confused I am, creates the air of an unhinged psychopath, not unlike the psychopaths we saw in Dead Rising, bringing a certain sort of charm to the game and leans into the weird level of camp and seriousness that is actually threaded pretty beautifully. It's definitely a fun romp in the story, and while the gameplay is pretty tight even 18 years later. However, this formula would also be the precursor to a large, drastic downturn this series would take in the next few entries. The focus on action and blowing away absurd amounts of enemies by Resident Evil standards may not have been off-putting at the time of this game's release, but in hindsight, and looking back at the different trend lines that this series took, it's obvious Capcom took the reception of Resident Evil 4 and decided to ratchet up all the aspects at play here up to 11, losing the identity that Resident Evil had up until this point. As we will see in 5 and the most lauded and dreaded 6, the series loses its focus on the horror and leans heavily into the action that is almost becoming unrecognizable as a series, and all of that was supplanted by this game. Resident Evil 4 still holds up well at the time of writing this in 2023, however it's easy to see where Capcom took inspiration for the next games, and if not for the focus on more action here in Resident Evil 4, 5 and 6 may have been completely different. But with that, I want to bring this video to a close. This one was a long one, and honestly was pretty hard to write for me, just knowing how important this game is to a lot of people, including myself. But ignoring the harm that this game would ultimately inflict on the series and franchise that is so beloved by many would be irresponsible, and while I do like it a lot, its glaring problems and tonal shifts cannot be ignored for what it did for later games in the series. While it's not necessarily fair at the time to judge a game for that, looking back, I feel like that's a little bit fair. But let me know what your thoughts on Resident Evil 4 are in the comments down below. Like I said before, I'm in there constantly and it does help with the algorithm, so if you did like this video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe for more awesome content like this. Thank you all for watching, and as always, my name is Brendan. Stay sexy, stay awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.